Hi families, culture, and Christ class. Welcome this morning as we dive into another Sunday school class, specifically in our schedule that we've been making our way through. We're going through today a second part of the Being a Tech-Wise Family. So part two of that, of kind of making our way through this book by Andy Crouch about being a tech-wise family. And as you can see in the coming weeks ahead, we'll be having, this class will be led by Steve Mitchell for a couple weeks. He'll be dealing with anxiety and depression. And I think that some of that topic, specifically fears and anxiety, is pertinent and relevant to our current context and what we're going through as a culture. And then the plan would be for in May to do Caring for Aging Parents with Dave Glessner and Pam Ream. And then 2 weeks of conversation about race with Timotheus Pope and Alan Jones. Timotheus and Alan are City Kids directors for Summer's Best 2 weeks. And so our hope is that we'd be able to continue to do that. And then that last class on May 24th, I'm not sure what topic we'll do at this point. I have some ideas, but I was leaving that a little open in light of kind of the current circumstances, leaving that open, and we'll address that when we get to that point. So, again, I want to mention that I think a very unique opportunity this month to leverage this month to reassess our relationship with technology and with media. And so I want to continue to encourage you to be thinking about that and doing that. Colton, Susie, and Anna and I have watched and discussed part one of the class together, and I thought it was a very helpful discussion, and I'm looking forward to watching this with and digesting this material with my wife and kids, and I think it'll be helpful for us, and I hope it will be helpful for you as well. They've been great discussion starters for us and helped us dive into some topics that we haven't really talked about in the past. And so I hope that that's helpful for you, be it a discussion between mom and dad, or a discussion between husband and wife, or a discussion between parents and kids. I think all of this topic is relevant to people in all stages of life. What does it look like to engage technology and media in a healthy way? So again, the book we're making our way through is Being a Tech-Wise Family by Andy Crouch. And again, all the graphs and charts as well as all the quotes are marked with page numbers from Crouch's book in the slides. And there should be a link that you can click on that has the PowerPoint that I'm using back here. And so that if this is hard to see, you can follow along with that PDF copy of the PowerPoint. And all scripture passages are from the ESV translation. So that's just the back of the book. Okay, so just a reminder, the main point, again, this book is about putting technology in its proper place. And so really that's what this Sunday school class is meant to be. It's helping us as families and parents and individuals decipher, what does it mean for me to put technology and media in its proper place in my life? I always love the John Piper analogy of that, all the planets of our lives need to come into proper, in order for them to really come to proper orbit, they need to be revolving around the sun being Jesus Christ. If Christ is at the center of our lives, that means that the massive weight of that sun will keep those other areas of our life in right orbit, and keeping them from spinning off out of control. And so I think that's true for technology and media. If it's in a proper place, if Christ is in His proper place in our life, and then that's the only real way ultimately for technology and media to rightly orbit in our life as well. And so that's what we're talking about. What does it mean to put things in their proper place? And so if we don't learn to put technology in all its forms in its proper place, we will miss out on many of the best parts of life in a family. And so I've appreciated being pushed by this book to proactively parent rather than be passive, to be proactive about conversation and to be proactively pushing myself and our family to think about this and to respond in a way that is most healthy. And there's no specific right answer. Just a reminder that the prescriptions that Andy has and the commitments that 10 commitments that he has in this book, they are discussion points. It's not that Andy or the Steltzers or any other family, the Crouchers, the Steltzers, any other family has necessarily done it the right way, but rather there's a variety of ways that a family might choose to navigate this world of technology and media that for them has put it in its proper place. I think there's some obviously biblical principles that are solid and a little bit more black and white, but there's a lot of gray in regards to how your family specifically approaches technology and media and what it means for it to be most healthy. And a part of that is these different stages too of life. So just encourage you to take this material and to discuss it and to pray and to come under the yielding yourself to the Spirit of God and to the truth of God's Scripture. And rightly be convicted about what is the proper place for technology and media in your life and in your family's life. So, well, let's go ahead and dive in. This is stuff that I just communicated, but I do hope that this is helpful to you and your family. And again, my challenge would be to I'd encourage you to commit to 2 changes that you and your family will make that will help you be more tech-wise and tech-healthy. So would love for you to take at least 2 things from our time together over the course of 2 weeks to commit to as a means to grow in this area of your life. So last week we did tech-wise commitments number 1 through 3, and now we're diving into tech-wise commitment 4 and following. And so tech-wise commitment 4 says this: we wake up before our devices do, and we go to bed before, and they go to bed before we do. So I missed it there. It's they go to bed before we do. So, so what does that mean? That means that that in the morning, our phones or our technological devices aren't the first thing that wake up with us and that we go to, and they're not the last things in our hands or before our eyes when we go to bed. So that's the idea. So what does it look like to change some habits in ways that diminish the amount of time we spend on devices? Love for you to pause the video and take some time to answer that question. So the idea is, tech around the clock. The following graphs and charts that I'll be going through in the next few minutes reflect studies on how we generally use technological media devices. And so I think it's just interesting and helpful to see what's the research show as far as how families are using these devices and what does it look like to, it gives us a better sense for what it looks like for us to navigate it in a more healthy way. And you can kind of compare and contrast. How is this true? Are any of these statistics true for your family? Are any of them consistent with how you experience your own use of technological media and devices? So this first one, on average, parents say their children spend 5 hours using an electronic device on a typical weekday. So that would be kind of that median average of how many hours? 5 hours. And so it'd be interesting to ask you, what do you think is average for your family, for you personally, for your kids? So this is interesting. So 62% of parents check their phone within the first hour of the morning. And what are they doing on the phone in that first hour of the day? And so you kind of see a list of the things that they are doing. And so I'd encourage you to take a look at this and walk through it and compare and contrast, again, your experience with the experience of others, and what do you think is healthy and what is not healthy. It's a good discussion to have. So at any point, if you want to pause the video and have those discussions, I think they're well worth having. So next one, after school, kids spend most of their time, and then in these 12 things listed, and the percentages are listed here in regards to the amount of, or where they spend the most time. And so Again, it's a chance to look at the data. It's a chance to evaluate your own experience and your family's own experience with these things, and ask questions about, well, what is healthy, and what do we think is healthy, and what do we think is unhealthy. So as we make our way from morning, afternoon, now we're in the evening. More than 4 in 10 parents say electronic devices are a significant disruption to family meals. Is that true of your family? To what extent is it true of your family? Again, a good question to ask. I think good thing to wrestle with and to think about. So 24% of respondents said they strongly agree that there is some disruption as a result of technological devices. And lastly, nighttime. What's the last thing parents do before bed? These were 4 answers that related to specifically technological media and devices. And you see the top one there is 31% say that the last thing they do is watch TV. So what does this mean? I guess I forgot, there is one more. So next one is, do you sleep with your phone next to you? And the majority, obviously, of people do. Is that healthy? Is that best? Is there a time to remove the phones from being near your bedside or your teenager's bedside? Is there a good reason to do that and to practice the discipline of having those phones somewhere else? I think it's a good question. So what's the point here? Andy's main points in the chapter is technology is disrupting our sleep, keeping us from proper rest. Vegging is not true rest, and furthermore, being passively entertained, which keeps us up later than we should at night, prevents us from resting in the Lord either at night or in the morning. Time with the Lord suffers. And that's really kind of Andy's point, is technology is disrupting our sleep, and it's me that is kind of taking that into the other area. Just, if I'm being honest, at those evenings where I get caught watching TV, kind of vegging out, passively being entertained, I tend to sleep less. I tend to stay up longer than I should. I'm kind of, you think of the situation where I'm kind of tired. I really ought to just go to bed and be ready the next morning to wake up early and engage the day and have plenty of time and feel well rested to get up and to open the scriptures in the morning. But because I chose TV, which it takes very little energy and mind power to engage that passive form of entertainment. Because I engage that entertainment, I don't end up waking up as early as I ought to. I'm not as fresh the next day, and so at least from my perspective, I've wasted a lot of time and time that could have been spent in better ways. Not that there isn't a place for watching a movie or watching TV at night, but I think there's times where we end up watching it longer than we ought to, when we should have just gone to bed. And I think that our relationship with the Lord, my relationship with the Lord, often suffers because of that. So I think of Matthew 11:28 through 30, where Jesus says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And when I'm looking to rest by way of passive entertainment, I'm not really resting. It's not true rest. And as a result, I'm not coming to Jesus in the morning, or at night for that matter. I'm not praying. I'm not engaging the scriptures, and I'm not truly being refreshed and not having my soul restored in the way that it is created to be restored. So Andy's point would be, find a central place in the home, far from bedrooms, and park the screens there before bedtime. And I think the idea behind that is seek some margin of time before engaging technology when you wake up, and a margin of time away from technology before going to bed. He says this, quote, "We've been wildly inconsistent here." He's talking about his own family. "Our attempts to enforce the common bedtime and bedroom for devices have been met with stubborn resistance from our teenagers. It's later on that Andy admits how difficult it has been to fight against his own stubborn will as well. I think that's why these commitments could also be called disciplines. It really takes discipline to put technology in its proper place. I mean, it is really a battle. But it's a battle worth fighting in our own lives and in our families' lives. And I really think that this book, for me and I hope for us, is a call to engage that battle. If we're not engaging that battle, this is the call to engage that battle. To battle for redeeming the time, to battle for what is best, to battle for putting technology in its proper place in our lives and in our homes. So tech-wise commitment number 5. We aim for no screens before double digits at school and at home. The idea is trying to limit the screen time of kids that are under the age of 10. So I'm just going to toss out for time's sake, some key quotes from this chapter, and it is something worth considering. Obviously, I'm giving you the highlights of this book. The book is well worth the read and I encourage you to engage it. But one of the quotes they has is this, quote, "As children, our bodies are full of energy and primed for physical learning. We're designed to explore our world and learn through all our senses. So it could be that the proliferation of technology, especially screens at earlier and earlier ages, may well be remembered as one of the most damaging epidemics of the 21st century." Our first years, another quote, "Our first years on this planet are the time when we can be learning, when we are primed to learn in embodied ways. There is a whole amazing world to explore that requires body and soul together. And increasingly, instead of spending their days playing and learning in that rich, complex, demanding world, our children are engaging in the same kind of limiting, game-like activity of adults, that passive entertainment." And so, and it's interesting, Anna and I have had the conversation about so many, if we were to go to Silicon Valley and go to many of, where a vast majority of the people that are designing and programming these technological devices, they know this fact. They know that it is not healthy for kids under the age of 10 to be on these devices. And so it's amazing that so many of those in Silicon Valley do this very thing. They restrict their kids from engaging this kind of media at an early age because they know of its negative consequences. And so I just, again, would encourage parents to limit time as much as possible during those critical developmental years. It's during those developmental years, the statistics say that between the ages of birth to 10 is when the majority of a person's worldview is shaped. And in order for that worldview to be changed, there's a deconstruction that has to happen until it's changed. But really, it's within those first 10 years that their worldview is developed. And so it's best if kids during that time are not being developed to be reliant upon technological media. So, quote from page 130, Andy says, "We most often give our children screens not to make their lives easier, but to make our lives easier." And I think there's some truth to that, and certainly that has been a temptation for Anna and myself that we have fallen into. There are plenty of times where it was just easier to put on the TV or to turn on or to give our children a device than it was to engage real parenting in that moment. And so guilty as charged at times. So Andy is encouraging parents and teachers, and that's why it says home and school, parents and teachers to fight for embodied learning and growing during the early developmental years and avoiding virtual experiences and learning via technological devices. So that's what he is encouraging us to do. And there's a lot in there that I just don't have time to go into, statistics and research that backs up that idea. And ironically, some of that, obviously there's conflicting opinions on this, but I do believe strongly that there is wisdom in limiting our children's contact with devices and with technological media and virtual reality, particularly in the developmental stages of their life. The excuse that they need to be technologically savvy, I don't think that really ultimately rings that true. I really believe and think, based on evidence, both anecdotally in my own children's life as well as the evidence in this book and other places, that children can very quickly learn how to navigate the world of technology, and it can be learned very fast later. But the ability to engage a book, the ability to engage relationships, the ability to build a conversational ability to listen to a story, these are things that are best developed in those early years. So there's wisdom of, for instance, of waiting to give our kids phones. So this is an interesting statistic about who has a phone and at what stage do they have it. And so it looks to be the case that at least a large portion, 48% of preteens have a phone, and of course 88% of teens have phones. And so there seems to be a little bit of a dividing line there, and there's another statistic that shows kind of prior to those preteen ages, it drops off more. But one wonders is when is it really best to give your child a phone? And I think that's a good question to be asking, and I think there are different healthy answers. I think principially, I would say there's great wisdom in waiting and holding off as long as possible to give kids their own phone. I would encourage parents to wait as long as possible and not be in a hurry. And I think it relates to something we talked about last week, and that is, if there is one thing our children need to hear from us over and over again, it's this: our family is different. Because I think that's going to be the number one pushback against parents as regards not having a phone is, well, all my friends have one. Well, our family is different, and we're going to do things differently. And we're doing things differently for biblical reasons. And I think 2 Corinthians 6 is a great example of that. We talked about that last week. That ultimately the foundational reason why our family is different as regards technological media is because, then this verse highlights it, we recognize that the key piece in a child's life of identity formation, understanding and coming to peace about who they are, who they've been created to be, who created them and who they were created to be, is inhibited and at times prohibited. It's prohibitive to have technological media too early, and social media too early in that process, that crucial process of identity formation, which happens within the context of family, the family of God, and the family at home. So, TechWise commitment number 6. We use screens for a purpose, and we use them together rather than using them aimlessly and alone. This is kind of under the topic heading of the ironic blessing of boredom. I misspelled boredom. Sorry about that. So, the battling boredom in a healthy way, spelled correctly this time on this second slide. So this is really what it's about. It's battling boredom in a healthy way. In the history of the human race, according to Andy, boredom is practically brand new. Less than 300 years old. The English word does not appear until the 1850s. And he offers that piece of information because of this. He says, we feel busy and overworked in ways even our grandparents couldn't have imagined, even as many of us work far less hard physically than most of them did. But that's actually why we get bored. Boredom for children and for adults is a perfectly modern condition. The technology that promises to release us from boredom is actually making it worse, making us more prone to seek empty distractions than we have ever been. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that technology And you recognize this even in the store, right? We talk about this. This conversation happens a lot when you're in the line at the store, and that's a moment of silence. It's a space where boredom happens. And so instinctually, we absolve that boredom via an iPhone. And that may not be best. Because what it does is it prevents us from having a conversation with a stranger. It prohibits us from doing that. It inhibits our being social. But it does release us from boredom. But maybe boredom isn't all that bad for us and for our kids. That's kind of the idea, is that boredom isn't necessarily bad. It's good because it forces us to engage in healthy. It should force us and push us to engage in the healthiest of things. And eye candy and Candy Crush is not necessarily is not the healthiest way to alleviate boredom. In many ways, this commitment is a repeat of Andy exhorting us as parents to limit using technology as a means of distracting our kids from boredom or from wild behavior or even from hardship or pain. I remember having this conversation with Anna, and we talked about the fact that, so I'm sure you've experienced this within your own family. So we every year make a pilgrimage to Minnesota. We journey to Minnesota. It's where Anna's family is from. It's a long trip to get out there, and so we don't make it often, but our kids love to see their cousins in Minnesota. And particularly Susie, as our only daughter, not having another girl in the family as far as a sister, she has two girl cousins that are right about her age, and she adores them and adores spending time with them. It's just so rich for her. And so when we come home, there's that time period of boredom. There's that time period of mourning the loss of time with her cousins, of sadness. And one of the things that we've been convicted of is it's very easy for us to try to alleviate that pain and that difficulty, that kind of loss that she feels, by diving to media, some type of distraction. And one of the best pieces, I don't know where we got this advice, but one of the best pieces of advice that we got was let her walk through the difficulty. Don't try to distract her from it or alleviate. Give her the chance to work through that without distracting her from it. Because it's in that process of working through the mourning, albeit small mourning process, of the loss of her cousins and time with them, that kind of sense of sadness that she feels, it's in working through that she's strengthened and that she grows. And so I think that principle carries through all sorts of parts of our life. That the idea is that the pain or difficulty of boredom, the pain or difficulty of having to work things out is important to walk through without being distracted, without the easy of technological media. So according to Andy, technological media is purposefully edited to never require too much concentration or contemplation. Instead, it grabs our attention and constantly stimulates our desire and delight in novelty. It's, again, the point is it's easy. And as a result, we're not building in our kids or in ourselves the necessary gravitas of life. The chutzpah, the gravitas, the grit, if you will, that's necessary to walk in a healthy way through life. And so there's wisdom, both for us as individuals and parents and for our kids, to not go to the easy of technology to make our way through boredom or through any difficulty that we might face. For boredom, according to Andy, is a sign that our capacity for wonder and delight, contemplation and attention, real play and fruitful work, has been dangerously depleted. We now have the technology to be perpetually distracted from boredom, and thus we never realize how bored we really are. And I would add to that, we have the technology to be perpetually absolved of guilt, of feelings of guilt, feelings of sadness, feelings of all sorts of things. We just go to technological media in order to solve that, and it never does. It really doesn't solve those root issues. And so it's not I think it was Bilbo Baggins in J.R. Tolkien's famous book, The Hobbit, that said that he felt after his journey, he felt like butter being thinly spread, scratched over a piece of toast. And I think that's the way that media, when we try to absolve a feeling of guilt or of sadness or something that we're trying to distract ourselves from, when we try to absolve that with media, we end up feeling more like butter dragged over toast than being truly feeling rich and thick and uplifted. So another quote, the good news is that the more often we resist the easy solutions, the easier the solution will be to find, because our children and we ourselves will start to develop capacities, grit, gravitas, to explore and discover that will make them and make us less prone to be bored in the first place. So may I share 3 ways that me and my family have been battling boredom recently. Perhaps these might be helpful to you. Number one, natural beauty of God's creation. The heavens declare the glory of God. The sky proclaims His handiwork. Day to day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out from all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. God's creation is glorious and incredibly more glorious than anything that we would see through a technological device. And yet, often we don't experience God's creation as more glorious than what we experience on technology. And I think that's a travesty. And so one of the ways that we've been trying to fight that, particularly recently, is by getting outside, going on hikes together, getting out in God's creation, and not just being outside, but encouraging ourselves and our kids to see God's creation, to see it for what it is, to explore it in a way that we appreciate its glory. The natural beauty of God's creation and the natural glory of God's creation is all around to be explored. It's one of the things I love about the people of Somerset County. I love that we are a people that generally do appreciate these things. We love to fish, we love to hunt, we love to hike, we love to bike, we love to raft, we love to kayak, we love to be out in God's creation. So just encourage you, get outside. This weekend, get outside. And get away from technology and enjoy the beauty and the glory of God's creation. Books. See if this loads for me here. Reading stories. Kids reading stories, you as moms and dads reading to your kids. There is no age that doesn't enjoy that. I enjoy having it when we're around the dinner table and Anna's reading from the Chronicles of Narnia. I love it. Our kids love it. And so can't encourage you enough to read some stories, some classic stories, Bible narrative, the great stories of Samson, the stories in the book of Judges, of Gideon, of Joseph. Read the Bible narratives. The heroic Bible narratives and real Bible narratives, so true to life. Read classic tales. Read the classics. Read the Chronicles of Narnia. What a classic work by C.S. Lewis. Can't encourage you enough to sit down in the evenings, either at dinner or around your living room or family room at night and read through a book together. My family, I mentioned the Chronicles of Narnia, we really love, by John Flanagan, the Ranger's Apprentice series or the Brother Band series. They're great books, particularly for boys. They're just full of adventure, and we just love them. And so I'd encourage you to get some books and to read. A great thing to be doing to redeem the time. So that's not going to play, so we'll kind of move on. Spontaneity is another one. Spontaneity seems to help. And so one of the great things that, what I mean by that is one of the things that when I was dating Anna, I don't know where I got this idea, but we went on a date that was completely spontaneous. It was planned, but spontaneous, and here's what I mean. What I had done is I'd taken Post-it notes, and I'd written on the back of the Post-it, so I'd take like 3 Post-it notes, and I'd write on the back 3 different options of where we would go to dinner. And then 3 different options of how we would dress up, whether we would dress up, really casual or really get dressed up. And so the whole night was kind of dictated by Anna picking one of those Post-it notes were lined up on a board, and it would say, like, where we're going to eat, and there'd be 3 Post-it notes and 1, 2, 3, and then on the back of the Post-it note was where we'd eat. So it was entirely possible that we could have ended up dressing up to the hilt and going to McDonald's to have dinner. Of course, you wouldn't be surprised to know that Anna ended up getting dressed up and going to the most expensive restaurant that I happened to pick. But anyways, all that to say is she picked really well. But the kids love this activity too, and I've used this activity as a parent over years. In fact, my kids will often ask for it because they just love it. And so we just, I think ahead of time of activities for the evening, and our whole evening is chosen by the kids as they choose different options. And so sometimes it's as simple as, not even just 9 different Post-it notes that all have 9 different activities that we could do that evening, and we might pick 3, and we commit ahead of time that we're going to do whatever it is that's under that Post-it note, and the kids just love the surprise. By the way, you can also call this a anti-boredom board, and so anytime I just have it ready, and anytime your kids are feeling bored, then just pull out the anti-boredom board and say, okay, you commit ahead of time that when you tell me that you're bored, you're going to have to pick. This from the anti-boredom board and do whatever activity you pick. And I just have found that it's a great way to be spontaneous with your kids in a way, and our family has loved it. And so I would encourage you that might be something that might be fun for you to do as a family. Tech-wise, commitment number 7. This is pretty short, but the idea is car time is conversation time. Really leveraging that time in your car, when you're in your car with your kids, to have meaningful conversations. So on page 158 it says this: car rides for many of us in car-centric America give us some of our best chances to break the 7-minute barrier. By 7-minute barrier, he's referring to a study done by a lady who essentially did some studies on conversation and said that it's typically after about 7 minutes that the conversation starts to really delve into true conversation that's intimate and deep and about real topics that are pertinent to the person's heart and to who they are. And so that's what is being referred to as far as a 7-minute barrier. Ideally, the dinner table can serve this purpose as well, especially if dinner is our daily Sabbath hour away from distracting technology. But in the car, we're arguably even more present to one another and physically closer to one another than even at the dinner table. And for many families, at least some nights of the week, schlepping from one activity to the next, the car is the dinner table. And boy, is that true. That is true in our family. This has been a season of life with kids ages 9 to 16 where there's so much time in the car going from activity to activity. And so, again, it takes discipline and intentionality to engage our children in meaningful conversation during that time in the car. And that's what he is encouraging us to do, to take advantage of that time. And obviously how this relates to technology is when kids get in the car, have their phones, and this is a great practice, by the way, anyways, for developing that sense of putting their phones in the glove box when they go to drive someday. So all phones go into the glove box when you enter the car, because the car is a place for conversation. And so I find that even just turning off the radio is tough for me because I love listening to the radio when I'm in the car. But so it's a discipline. Turn off the radio and talk to my kids and talk to my wife. Have meaningful conversation in the car. So that's really the point. of that one is just make the car a place where you're having meaningful conversation. And he actually makes the point, even with your 3 or 4-year-old. Again, engage your child in conversation, and again, this is. As I was reading, I was thinking of times where I think my wife would have said, or I would have said, "Look, I am at my wit's end. We just tried to take a 3-year-old on a shopping trip through the grocery store, and I'm lucky if I don't throw him out the window." You just at that kind of point where you're just so frustrated and you're tired and you're. Granted, there's a place for putting on, the radio or giving the child a technological device for the sake of your sanity. But the point here is, try to avoid it. Try as much as possible for us as parents to push ourselves to make the car, more often than not, a place for conversation and for engaging our children in meaningful ways. So tech-wise commitment number 8. Spouses, and by the way, this is the most serious in many ways of them in regards to, it's a pretty sobering and heavy topic, but spouses have one another's passwords and parents have total access to children's devices. That's the rule in the Crouch home, in Andy Crouch's home. And so he would recommend that in every home. And the reason is this tech-wise commitment is about honesty, openness, and accountability with our devices. And it's in light of our pornographic culture. So, quote, streaming into our homes and onto our phones, accounting by the most widely cited estimate for 30% of all internet traffic, pornography provides and portrays a world where sex is easy. So on page 169, that's his point, is just that 30% of all internet traffic is streaming into homes and onto phones as pornography. And so that's astonishing. As well as another astonishing fact is this: 62% of teenagers say they have received a nude image on their phone, and 40% say they have sent one. So I don't think that's a surprise to any of you that this is the world that we live in. So the statistics on how much money and how much time is spent on the internet, specifically for reasons of pornography, is just it's mind-boggling. So in view of this, in light of this, this is where being tech-wise becomes just increasingly important, because this is just deadly stuff. So evidence is piling up that the earlier and the more that a person uses porn, the less they are capable of real intimacy. The good news is that the Lord is redemptive, right? I think of Joel 2, where it says that what the locusts have eaten, God can redeem. So God can redeem situations where great damage has been done. But boy, all the better if that damage is avoided from the beginning and from the get-go. And so all of us would want to spare our children and our spouses and ourselves from this plague. But in one sense, none of us can. If you have teenage children, whether boys or girls, it is likely that they have already been exposed to pornography and that they have even sought it out. And so that's just the reality of the culture that we live in. And so what does that mean? So it is not just individuals who become addicted to porn. Our whole society has embraced the underlying easy everywhere view of sex that feeds it. And yet there are both nudges and disciplines we can embrace that will give us a fighting chance of real faithfulness and intimacy and ultimately real family. So my question is, so I'd love you to take some time to discuss this, but what have you done to address this in your own life, your family's life, and home? And what will you do? If you haven't taken the time to have a real discussion with your wife or husband, or an honest one, or with your teenage children, this is the time. If that hasn't been done, I implore you, have that conversation. It is necessary for there to be openness and honesty in this area in our homes. So I'd encourage you to pause the video and take some time to consider that. So what about addressing the problem? So I want to read one of the statements that Andy made, and then I want to counter that statement. He says this, a home where wisdom and courage come first, where our central spaces are full of satisfying, demanding opportunities for creativity, where we have regular breaks from technology and opportunities for deep rest and refreshment, where devices sleep somewhere other than our bedrooms, and where both adults and children experience the satisfactions of learning in thick, embodied ways rather than thin technological ways, where we've learned to manage boredom, and where even our car trips are occasions for deep and meaningful conversation. This is the kind of home that can equip all of us with an immune system strong enough to resist pornography's foolishness. And I think all of these things that we've gone through are incredibly important and even essential at times for being healthy and more healthy. But I will say definitively that you can do all those things, and they will not ultimately build an immune system strong enough to resist pornography's foolishness or any technological foolishness. I'm sorry. We are sinners and have a sinful nature. And these things, these practical strategies are important and they're good, but they will not solve our sin problem. They will not be they are not the means of changing and transforming a heart that has desires that are inconsistent with what is best for them and what is good and what is right and what is true and what is noble. So Colossians 2 and 3 affirm this. Listen to this. This is important. If with Christ you died to the elemental spirits of the world, one of them being sexual immorality, why, as if you were still alive in the world, do you submit to regulations? Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, referring to things that all perish as they are used, according to human precepts and teachings. In other words, why are you adhering to practical strategies as a means to deal with a heart sin issue? These, meaning those practical strategies, indeed have an appearance of wisdom in promoting self-made religion and asceticism, meaning that they do have an appearance of wisdom, and there is some wisdom in having practical strategies. So, ascetic practices, disciplines, a severity of the body, they have some wisdom and sometimes just the appearance of wisdom, but they are of no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh. And the reason that Paul writes that to the Colossians is he knows the propensity of the heart. If the heart wants it, the heart will find any way it can to get around whatever barrier it needs to get at what it wants. And so those practical strategies are good margins. But for a heart that wants something, and a sinful heart will find a way around it. And so how is it? What's the root of the problem? And how is it that a heart is changed? How are desires transformed to be healthy and to want the right things? The answer is in the next verse. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ who is your life appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. It is by yielding and surrendering to Christ, it is by yielding our minds to the Spirit of God that his power is made manifest in our hearts and our heart's desires. And it's only then that we're able to put to death what is earthly, put to death sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desires, covetousness, which is idolatry. And so setting our minds on the right things and setting our minds on God, setting our hearts and minds on God is the means of being filled with the Holy Spirit and having our minds and hearts changed. So I'd encourage you to engage these practical strategies, but they ultimately will not build an immune system. The immune system is only built by the Spirit at work in our hearts and in our minds and in our lives. So So I would encourage you. And Andy would have a filter. Andy recommends the Open DNS service. Wait as long as possible for your kids to have unrestricted access to the internet. For Andy, it was their kids' junior and senior year of high school before they had internet access on their phones. As long as possible. Wait. Hold off. It's okay to be different. It's just unrestricted access to the internet is a recipe for, at a young age, where they can't handle it, is a recipe for addiction. And it's a recipe for unhealth in a child's heart. It inhibits and prohibits their ability to set their minds on the things of God. And so it encourages you to wait as long as possible. I'm amazed that we as parents and in our culture are so concerned about our kids' physical safety. We will fight tooth and nail for our kids' physical safety. Helmets on their heads when they're biking. I'm not saying these things are bad, they're great. But we'll fight tooth and nail for those. And then we'll turn around and let our kids have unrestricted access to the internet, where their heart can be absolutely destroyed. And so it is just as important, if not more important, that we protect our kids' hearts and their spirit. Not that we can do it perfectly, but we certainly need to be about seeking to put things in their life that protect them in those pivotal ages, in those crucial young ages, protecting them from that which could damage them in significant ways. Not physically in this case, but spiritually, emotionally, and mentally and psychologically. So the number one way to address the problem is healthy relationship with Jesus and healthy relationship with you. If, in fact, you have a healthy relationship with Jesus. Let me be bluntly honest. If you don't have a healthy relationship with Jesus, then that's first priority. But if you are growing in a relationship with Jesus Christ, authentic relationship, and committed to living a transformed life, and in healthy relationship with Jesus Christ, then you are in a great position to walk beside and disciple your children. And so I'd encourage you, first and foremost, to seek out right relationship with Jesus and healthy, growing relationship with Jesus, and then point your kids and teach them. You can't lead them where you're not in fact going. And so, but if you are going in that direction already, then you're in a great place to help walk beside your kids. This is amazing, by the way, this statistic. Can't really see it, so I split it down, but it says the loneliness of trying to quit porn. And the question to the kids was, to teenagers, do you have anyone in your life who is helping you avoid pornography? Meaning, do you have any adult that is engaged in your life in this aspect of your life? 21% yes, that is tragic. 21% yes, said yes. 79% said no. Parents, I don't care how uncomfortable it is, you got to do it. You have to engage your kids on this level. You have to be a person that's walking beside them, helping them understand what it means to engage this. And by the way, you're not alone. If you don't have someone that's helping you and you need help, that is why Tony, Mike, myself, the elders are here at church. We want to be helping you grow in relationship with Jesus Christ. Please tell someone and engage someone on this topic if you need help. Then underneath that was, do they know anyone who could help? Only 47% said yes. That means that there was 53% of teenagers that they don't know anyone or feel comfortable with anyone in order to get the help that they need. I mean, again, the kids need a place to talk about this stuff. I'm so grateful that my parents engaged me on this topic at a young age. And I didn't have to deal with iPhone, and I didn't have to deal with internet pornography, but they engaged me on the topic of sexuality when I was 13, or 12 or 13. And we had honest and vulnerable and open conversations that helped me navigate this world. I wasn't alone. And I desire that be the case for your kids and for you, that you have someone that is navigating this part of your life with you. So who is helping? I actually think it's a little sad that 29% said a girlfriend or boyfriend. I think in most cases, a girlfriend or boyfriend, in most cases, is not the best person to be navigating this with. But better than nothing. But 21% said parent, 16% said pastor or spiritual advisor, 14% said a friend, 8% said another adult. Boy, I hope that, that your kids are feeling that they can come to you as they inevitably, as they reach the preteen and teenage years, have to navigate these waters. Yeah, this is important stuff. So, Tech-Wise Commitments number 9 and 10, I encourage you to get the book and take the time to ponder its wisdom. I'm not going to give them to you just because I'd love for you to engage the book. So at the end, when all is said and done, engage these topics, engage this idea of being a tech-wise family and learning and growing, to engage technology in a way that's healthy and in a way that that puts your family in the best place to put technology in its proper place. Commit to 2 changes you and your family will make that will help you be a more tech-wise and tech-healthy family. Let me pray for you and pray for us as parents, as kids, as moms and dads, as husbands and wives, that we would grow in our healthy, putting in proper place and in a healthy way technology and media. So let's pray. Lord God, I thank you for this time. Lord, I do long for my own life, my own family, my own marriage, and the marriages and families of St. Paul's, that we would be healthier in this area of our lives. There's no doubt in my mind that we can be healthier, that there's places to grow in this area of our lives. And so I just pray that you would help us and that you would encourage us and convict us in the ways that are necessary to grow in this area, that we might become closer to you, that we might become more filled with your Spirit, grow in you, and be stronger in our faith. And that we would be able to put technology in its proper place. Lord, would you help us, and would you walk closely to us and near us as we seek to be tech-wise families and a tech-wise church family. Lord, we ask it in Christ's powerful name. Amen.